Check, check. 1, 2, 2, 2, 1, 2. Check, check. 1, 2, 2, 2, 1, 2.
Welcome to the international headquarters of the Indivisible Project. This is literally our offices right here, and you see behind us this big map with a ton of blue dots. There are roughly 6,000 blue dots, and those represent all of the Indivisible local chapters behind us. We had a big group of people on the floor right here earlier today sticking all the dots to where they actually exist. And we're going to get started in just a second answering your questions and covering the really exciting reclaim, recess materials and other information we have to talk about. But before we do, Angel is going to help us identify the most recent Indivisible chapter that registered literally today, and it is Indivisible Huxley in Iowa. And so as Angel tries to locate where Iowa is and Huxley is,
right over here.
Nailed it.
I think.
So here's the message that we got from them today. They registered today, Indivisible Huxley. They said, "We are 43 members and growing online. Know of any others who would be interested? Invite them on Facebook to join Indivisible Huxley. We are affecting politics at the state, local, and national level. We recently met with staffers from our senators' offices and made our voices heard." I love these guys.
Congratulations.
This is great. We meet every other week to swap ideas and get ready for action. So if you are in Huxley, Iowa, which means you are one of 3,000 people, join this relatively large group of 43 members. They're there, they're meeting, and you can make your voice heard. So we're going to get started today. We want to spend most of this 30 minutes that we have with you answering your questions. A lot of you from across the country have been submitting questions about how you can have the biggest impact during this congressional recess. We'll start briefly with introductions, me, Leah, and Angel. Then Leah is going to go over a bit of why congressional recess is so exciting for us, for everybody trying to resist the Trump agenda, why recess is a huge opportunity. Angel's going to touch a bit on the budget, the big budget fight that's coming up, and then all in on a bit about this Saturday tax march that is happening that we're really excited about. So I think that's the game plan. Getting started, I'm Ezra Levin. I'm the executive director of the Indivisible Project. My background is in anti-poverty policy. I was on Capitol Hill for several years as deputy policy director for Congressman Lloyd Doggett, a Democrat from Austin, Texas. And so that's what I'm going to be reflecting on when we talk today about what works in pressuring members of Congress. Leah?
Hi, I'm Leah Greenberg. I got my start working on the Hill and have since been working in human trafficking policy at the State Department and as the policy director for a gubernatorial campaign.
Hi everyone, my name is Angel Padilla, and I spent a couple of years in Congressman Gutierrez's office. He's a Democrat from Chicago, where I did healthcare for his office. And since over the last few years, I've been doing healthcare for immigrants, so a lot of federal healthcare programs like Obamacare, Medicaid, and CHIP.
Excellent. So Leah, do you want to talk a little bit about why is congressional recess so freaking exciting for us?
Absolutely. So we saw why congressional recess was so exciting last month. Back when you showed up, hundreds of thousands of people showed up across the country. You made your voices heard, and you had the incredible effect of taking down the #1 priority of a unified Republican government, the repeal of the Affordable Care Act. And in doing that, you saved health insurance for over 24 million people. You showed up at town halls, you showed up at district offices, you made your voices heard, and even if your representatives wouldn't meet with you, which was the case for many, we know they were listening because they went back and they refused to repeal Obamacare.
I mean, it's just an amazing victory. The #1 legislative priority was taken down because people in Arkansas and Missouri and New York and California and Minnesota said, we aren't going to stand for this. You cannot pass this bill. And they didn't. So it's amazing for the 24 million Americans who are going to hold on to their health insurance, but it's also an amazing demonstration of constituent power. Yeah. So that's what this Congress is going to listen to. That's what this congressional recess is about, demonstrating your constituent power on your home turf.
Yeah, and just on that point, make sure that your members of Congress know that you agree or disagree with how they were going to vote had we had that vote in the House, because it's super important for them to hear, get some feedback from you on even that vote that, luckily didn't happen.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So, Angel, do you want to talk a little bit about this big budget fight that's coming up?
Yeah, so basically in 2 weeks, Congress needs to fund the government. Funding expires for the government on April 28th, and if Congress doesn't pass a spending bill, then the government shuts down. So key agencies like the Department of Interior, the Department of Education, Department of Energy, all of those agencies will shut their doors. The problem is Trump wants to defund all these really important programs like Meals on Wheels, wants to decimate the EPA, wants to cut things like financial aid for college students, wants to cut after-school programs. And why is he doing that? Because he wants to fund things that none of us really want or need, like a border wall or detention camps or a deportation force. So it's super important for you to talk to your members of Congress and let them know that you don't want any of these programs cut, and you don't want any money spent on these programs like the border wall or Trump's deportation force. Super important. There's 2 weeks left, and your member of Congress needs to hear from you right now.
That's great. And if you go to the website, if you go to indivisibleguide.com, we have reams of materials on this. So you go to the resource section, there is a recess resources where you can find scripts and you can find toolkits and explainers on the budget. That's all open, easy to download. You take it and run with it, take it to your town halls, and that's great. So I'm just going to cover the last thing that we're bringing to the table here before we get to your questions, and that is taxes. Now, who's excited for taxes? I know I am. Right. Taxes is actually really exciting right now because it's not just about release of Donald Trump's tax returns. It's actually about international intrigue. It's about ethics. It's about transparency. It's about whether this administration is actually acting in the interests of the American people or in order to line its own pockets. And we just don't know. Donald Trump is the first president since President Nixon to not release his tax returns. And in fact, Congress acted to get Nixon's tax information. So what we know right now is not whether or not Donald Trump is engaging in some kind of wide-scale cover-up of his business dealings or of his entanglements with Russia or other foreign dictators. What we know is that Congress has the unilateral ability to find out and get his tax returns. And so far, they haven't been willing to do it, but they can. And so the tax marches this Saturday, they're in Washington, D.C. They're in over 120 million communities across the country. You can go to indivisibleguide.com, put in your zip code, you'll find the tax march near you, or go to taxmarch.org. What you're doing there is not asking Donald Trump, pretty please, we'd like to see your tax returns. No, you're telling your member of Congress, you have the power to do this, and you need to do it. There's a piece of legislation called the Presidential Tax Transparency Act. It's actually a bipartisan piece of legislation in the House. There's something called a discharge petition, where they're collecting signatures so that if they get enough signatures from members of Congress, it's going to get a vote in the House. This is huge. This is a way to confirm that Donald Trump is actually acting in the interest of the American people, or if he's not, we got to know. So the tax marches this Saturday, April 15th, are an opportunity for you to make your voice heard, you to tell your member of Congress you need to see this. And look, it's not just Democrats who are getting on this. Earlier this week, at a congressional event during recess, we had a representative who's a Republican in Florida listen to an individual Indivisible member, and they were demanding Donald Trump's tax returns, and they said, hey, I agree with you, that's a good idea, and they changed their position. So if anybody tells you this doesn't work, it's all partisan, the Republicans are never going to get on board, it's not true. You can actually pressure your member of Congress and they'll change their behavior, because remember, they care more about their own reelection and how their own constituents think about them than anything that President Trump is trying to get done. So you hold a lot of power here. So with that vision of power, all these things in our laps, these are questions that you've been submitting us over the last few days, and so we're going to jump into them and have a little bit of a conversation. That's what this is about, and if you have more questions, feel free to tweet at us, feel free to send us messages, we'll try to get to them. Yep. Who wants to kick it off?
I'll start it off. So we have Jim, who asks, the Tea Party yelled and verbally attacked their members of Congress. Why does your guide disagree with their strategy by suggesting to be polite at town halls? Maybe this one's a good one for Leah?
Sure. Well, I think one of the first reasons why we disagree with that strategy is because we were some of the people who actually got attacked at town halls, and that's not a very fun experience. But more importantly, when you're going to a town hall, you're making a statement, and you're making you're there for a political purpose. You're there to show what your position is and to make your member listen. And the best way to make them listen is to get your message across. And you do that, and you do that by, as we say regularly, being polite and persistent and just making sure that your voice is heard. Things like yelling and being nasty just distract from that message.
So you both shouldn't spit on staffers because that's a bad thing to do. You shouldn't spit on people, but also it actually undermines the rest of your message. You have a point to make. You have concerns that are legitimate as a constituent, and if you express those in a reasonable way, they'll get the message. That's actually the best way to pressure your member of Congress. So I'm gonna read off this one. Lori asks, there are so many, and that's all in caps, items to talk about to my rep or senator. Should I call them every day with a different item, or should I call once a week with a laundry list? Which one is more effective? One of y'all want to take it?
Yeah, I can do that one. So it's great that you're engaged. You should stay engaged as much as you can. But one thing that I think we would really want to stress is that the most important thing that you can do is have that direct interaction with your member of Congress. So if there's a town hall, go down there, ask your question directly in front of your friends and family, and ask the member of Congress directly. And then also, if you can go down to his district office, have a district office meeting. The point is that if you have those direct interactions with your member of Congress, it's going to be more effective than having a phone call or writing a letter or sending a postcard.
And at the same time, I would also add, what matters when you call your member of Congress is a very clear ask, and it's something that you can verify later that they did or didn't do. So I would say call every day with a different, very specific ask so that that goes into the system as a different request.
Yeah, so if you call and you say something like, I want to be sure that the member of Congress supports education, you can bet that the staffer, if they're worth anything, is going to say, oh yeah, Congressman so-and-so really supports education. They will dodge. So the key is, like Leah's saying, this really specific ask that is Congressman so-and-so going to co-sponsor this bill? Is Congressman so-and-so going to vote in this way? That's a verifiable ask. And then you can see whether or not they did it. And afterwards, you can check in and say, hey, the congressman didn't do what you said that they were going to do. And so, in fact, when the member of Congress's staff gets that message in, they are kind of coding the information that they're taking in. If it's a vague ask, they're like, I don't need to really worry about it. Nobody's going to follow up with me on that. But if it's really specific, they're like, shoot, now we do have to keep track of this. So being specific is a really strategically important thing.
Great. All right, Ellen asks, I've had contact with 10 different resist groups, and I'm sure there are more. How would you recommend finding more groups within a huge district and uniting them, but also keeping our individuality? Answer?
Sure. Yeah. So you look at this map behind us. There are 6,000 groups that are just registered on Indivisible throughout the country. 6,000. So that's at least 2 and an average of more than 13 in every single congressional district in the country. And the amazing thing is, the resistance is not just Indivisible. There are a lot of other great community organizing, racial justice groups, and others that have been doing this for a long time and are participating in the resistance. So we really think that, look, the hard truth is we're facing an existential threat on the progressive side, that every single facet of the progressive ecosystem is under threat right now. And so partnerships is crucial. We cannot just be in our silos and focusing in on what we most care about. We got to focus on what our entire community cares about and stand up and make partnerships to protect those things. So at the national level, we're really doing that as much as possible. At the national level, we're forming partnerships with other grassroots organizing groups and with issue-specific groups with expertise in the environment or in racial justice or in economic justice or labor rights. We think that's important because we're not going to be able to accomplish this on our own. So at the community level, you should be really looking to who are the other groups in your community that are working on issues that Donald Trump is attacking. Where are the immigrant rights groups? Where are the racial justice groups? Where are the other community organizers in your community? And for God's sakes, invite them to your meetings. If you're having meetings on a weekly basis, they should be coming to you and you should be coming to them. And figure out how you can band together in order to resist. That doesn't mean that you're sacrificing what you're doing. It doesn't mean you have to give up your local Indivisible group. It means you're being a good ally. And being a good ally means showing up for when they're under threat. And then they'll show up for when you're under threat too. Anybody else have other thoughts on that?
No, that's good.
Nailed it. Okay. I've got one. Yeah?
Sure.
Daniel asks, Trump has said that if Democrats don't cooperate on health care, he'll bring them to the table by withholding funds from the Affordable Care Act, the ACA. This is a horrible political move, for sure, but meanwhile, working Americans will be the ones under attack for the next 4 years. What can we do to stop this on a local level?
Yeah, so we did have a great win a few weeks ago. We didn't have that Trump care vote that we were fighting against for the Republicans. 7 years they've been talking about doing this, and they couldn't get it done. And that's because of all of your activism at the local level, because you were going to your members of Congress and telling them you don't want Trump care, you don't want to repeal the ACA, and that's why it's super important that if this is still in their targets, you need to keep going down to your member's office and telling them that you don't want them to be taking up Trump care. Any time spent on Trump care is time wasted. There are bigger things that we need to focus on, and this is a waste of time. So the most important thing that you can do to protect the ACA is to keep telling your member of Congress you don't want them working on it.
That's a great answer.
Great. All right. Marie asks, we have tried diligently to get Senators Perdue, Senator Isaacson, and Reps Collins and Graves to have a town hall. No one is paying attention to North Georgia. Any ideas?
Well, we're paying attention to North Georgia. Hi, North Georgia. So we have a few toolkits on this. What do you do if your members of Congress are hiding from you? Or in some cases, they're holding sham town halls. These are town halls they're like teletown halls where they act as if they are producing an event that they're actually listening to their members of Congress, or they're actually listening to their constituents, but they're not. They're looking through the questions and only answering the favorable ones. So we've seen this across the country. These are the kinds of games that members of Congress play. Because remember, fundamentally what they are worried about is how they look locally. They are worried about looking weak. They are worried about looking like they're not representative of their constituents. That still gives you power. So if your member of Congress is not holding a town hall, hold your own town hall. We've seen this work across the country where people put up their own town hall, and well in advance, you can invite your members of Congress, invite your two senators, invite your representative, and say, hey, I've got a keynote speaking spot for you. If you don't show up, I'm going to be ready, though. There's going to be local press. There are going to be 500 people in this community center, and I'm going to have a cardboard cutout of you, or an empty chair, or one thing we saw, I thought it was really creative, the live chicken on stage. Somebody brought a live chicken on stage to represent their member of Congress being a chicken, not actually showing up and representing their constituents and making sure that they're listening to their constituents. Look, this is part of the job. You have a right to assume that your member of Congress is going to come back and listen to you. And I will say this doesn't always have to be hugely antagonistic. It doesn't have to be like you're in battle with your member of Congress. We've seen this work actually in Georgia. We saw members of Indivisible groups put on a constituent-led town hall, so one that wasn't organized by their member of Congress. And we saw that those members of Congress actually showed up. They actually did come out and listen. So this isn't just about trying to get bad press for your member of Congress. It's about pressuring them and saying, hey, look, we might not always see eye to eye, but you should come and listen to our concerns. Sometimes they're going to listen, sometimes they aren't. But regardless, if you get attention on it, they're going to get the message.
I would just add one thing. There's one thing that happens every morning in every single congressional office, every single senator's office, and it's that a junior staffer puts together all of the news clips of all of the media that covered the senator or the congressman in the state the day before. So when your senator is ignoring you, if you get a local media story, if you get a letter to the editor that says my senator is not paying attention, I guarantee you that Senators Perdue and Senator Isaacson, they are hearing that. They are, even if they don't seem like they're paying attention to you, they are hearing about it themselves and they're paying attention.
This brings up another thing. I actually, speaking of the Trump care file, we've talked about it a lot just because it's such a huge victory. But one of the members of Congress who we saw flip on Trump care is a Republican from New Jersey. And he was one of the first ones to say, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to vote for Trump care and take away 24 million Americans' health insurance. It was Representative Freeland-Heisen from New Jersey. And this representative is in a district with a few Indivisible groups. One of them, New Jersey 11th for Change, from, I believe, starting in January, started holding these events called Fridays with Freeland-Heisen. And the reason why they held them was because Representative Freeland-Heisen wasn't holding any kind of town halls. He wasn't holding public events. So they said, screw this, I'm going to actually hold these events. And these constituents came together and held these events on a weekly basis saying, hey, we've got concerns, come and talk to us. And look, they may or they may not have been able to meet with Representative Freeland-Heisen, but he was the one who actually dropped off of the bill. So they had an impact. So if your members of Congress aren't listening to you, if they're not coming to your events, don't take that as a sign that you're not having your voice heard. Your voice is being heard.
Exactly.
Okay, I'll go next. So we have Marcia from Brooklyn. She asks, my congressperson and senators are on my side, and I often feel like there's not much for me to do. Do you have suggestions on how I can help others whose representatives aren't as progressive as mine? Leah, do you want to take that?
Sure, absolutely. Well, the first thing is, as we get closer to elections in your neighboring states, you can start, or your neighboring districts, you can start thinking about how you can canvass and how you can do voter registration and activities there. But the other thing to remember is, just because somebody is a progressive doesn't mean that they're always going to land on the right side of every issue. We are seeing over and over again, there's a really powerful desire in Washington to pretend that we have a normal president making normal decisions, and even really progressive people sometimes forget that. And so part of your job is to remind people that this is not a normal president. I think we saw this most recently last week with the strikes in Syria. A lot of the Democratic establishment came out and said, oh, well, you know, this was a very reasonable thing to do, ignoring the fact that what we're actually seeing is a pattern of really belligerent, erratic, alarming activity on foreign policy. And so it's your job to remind even your progressive representatives that this is really scary and that you expect them to be standing strong against it.
Mm-hmm. The only thing I would add is, when we get this question a lot, is should you go and talk to someone else's member and try to get them to take a better position? And it's super important that you focus on your members of Congress, your 2 senators and your representative, because if they're not your representatives, they're not going to listen to you, they're not going to care what you have to say. So make sure that you focus on your representatives when you're doing your advocacy.
I think that's absolutely right. And I would add one thing to this, which is, even if your member of Congress did the right thing, they're not necessarily always going to do the right thing. And so being there, getting to know the staffers, putting the pressure on regularly is going to ensure that they know that there is constituent pressure to do that. And on top of this, positive reinforcement is really rare on Capitol Hill. Members of Congress often hear from constituents who are angry about something they did, but they don't hear about constituents when they did something good. And so actually, if you're in New York and you like what your senators just did with respect to Trump care, or with respect to the Supreme Court justice, or with respect to Syria, that's great. Let them know. Let them know that you appreciate the fact that they're doing everything they can to stand up against the Trump administration's agenda, so that next time they act, they think, wow, I got contacted by 500 people who said they're happy that I made that speech pushing back against Trump care. That's going to factor into their future decision-making calculus.
Great. Joseph asks, what can be done to keep the media focused on the issues that could topple our democracy, like the ties between the Trump regime and Russia?
Oh, great. Wait, can I take this? Yeah. No, so this is great. So the ties between the Trump administration and Russia. So taxes, look, I understand taxes is kind of boring, right? Because it's just like, who wants to see somebody's 1040? But that's not what the tax march is actually about. The tax march is about the foreign entanglements with Russia and other dictators. It's about whether Donald Trump is actually subverting the basic tenets of American democracy. It's about whether he's acting in the interest of the American people. So when you think about the tax marches this Saturday, you should really be thinking about this being really about the basic functioning of our government. So there are going to be a lot of opportunities, unfortunately, over the course of the next weeks and months to keep the focus on how exactly Donald Trump is acting in the interest of the American public. But the tax marches this Saturday are one of those big opportunities. You can make the media focus on these conflicts of interest, on whether or not Donald Trump is acting in our interests, by participating in these tax marches. So I would just say again, please go to indivisibleguy.com, type in your zip code, find the local tax march near you, and join up. Show up on Saturday, make your voice heard, tell your member of Congress that you need to see Donald Trump's tax returns, because you need to know whether or not he's in the pocket of Putin or if he's acting to enrich himself and his kids. This is a basic requirement of the presidency, and it's something that, again, every president since Nixon has done. And it's actually funny. So the question I had was, how can I find out where my local tax march is? So we answered that one. So thanks, Judith, for that question. Again, indivisibleguy.com. Type in your zip code. You can find your tax march there. Taxmarch.org has a lot of great information. And again, it's not just Indivisible doing this. We were talking about partnerships earlier. There are dozens of national groups that are participating to push the tax marches out to make it a success, and we're proud to be part of that coalition. Oh, I guess I haven't asked one in a while, because I used one up. Okay, yeah? Okay, yeah, Carl asks, I would like to get more diverse communities involved in my recess work. Who should I be approaching?
I'll start.
Yeah.
I think that one question, whenever you're looking at diversity in your organization or diversity in your partnerships, is doing outreach, trying to understand who are the local groups that are active in your community, what are their priorities, and how can you support them. And so I think that we're actually seeing a really great opportunity coming up shortly. There are going to be nationwide marches to support immigrants on May 1st. And I would say if you can find out where your local march is going to be, what organizations are going to be leading that, how you can support and really amplify their message of support for immigrants in their community, that is really going to be an important way to move forward.
Yeah, no, I just sort of building on that point, I recently heard about a group in LA, an Indivisible group in LA that went with an immigrant to an ICE check-in to offer support because there's a lot of fear that, when you go to one of these check-ins, you might get, detained and then maybe deported. And so it's great to see Indivisible groups already going and helping immigrants and making sure that they are safe when they go to these things. So those are the kinds of partnerships and activities we really hope that people are doing.
Awesome. I just asked.
Okay, I'll go next. Okay, so Tom asks, you guys are doing great work catching up with these
Thanks, Tom.
these sham town halls, so like the teletown halls that we mentioned earlier. Some reps are doing things like RSVP and will let you know when and where the town hall will be, but they don't give you any notice, so there's not a whole lot of time for you to actually plan to get there. So the question is, are you seeing progress in shaking out or effectively putting the fear of voter rejection into these reps? Is there more that we can be doing in the field? Ezra, do you want to?
Yeah, I mean, Leslie, you have.
Go ahead.
Well, the amount of energy out in broadly the field in the country is astounding. And so I think the bottom line is we're seeing a lot of conservatives and people who would like to rubber stamp the Trump administration's agenda shaking in their boots. And I think a great example of this is what just happened in the 4th District of Kansas. So the 4th District of Kansas is this uber conservative district. It's actually a Republican plus 15 district, which means that you would expect the Republican to win by at least 15 points. The last Republican in that district, Mike Pompeo, who is now unfortunately CIA director, won by, I believe it was 30 points. And so what we saw happen just earlier this week was a pretty darn close race by one candidate who happened to be a Democrat who said, I want to oppose the Trump administration's agenda, and then the Republican who basically just wants to rubber stamp it. And it was excruciatingly close. There was a 25-point swing in the favor of this anti-Trump candidate. Now, that race wasn't won, but it still has sent shockwaves through the political system. It is an utter disaster for the Trump administration that this race was that close. So absolutely, we are seeing the members of Congress see that the Trump administration's agenda is not popular. The only reason why they're getting that message is because people are coming out. That happened in Kansas 4th. We're going to see more of that action in special elections across the country this year. But it's also about what are they hearing from their constituents every single week? Are these constituents coming out to district offices? Are they coming out to public town halls? And if, back to the original question, if they're holding these sham town halls, whether they're teletown halls or they're doing these town halls where they let people know a day in advance or something or schedule it during the workday, those are shams too. They're doing that so they can say that they were holding some kind of event where they were listening to their members of when they were listening to their constituents, but they weren't. So the thing that you can do is not just sit on the couch or not just miss it. You can hold your own town hall. You have an opportunity. You say, look, I can't make a town hall on a Wednesday afternoon when I find out the day before, but I'm holding a town hall with my Indivisible group this Saturday at 2 p.m. You are invited to show up. I hope you do, Congressman. And if they don't show up, again, have that live chicken ready, and you'll get some news out of it.
I'll just add one thing, which is that when your representative is holding a sham town hall or when they're holding a teletown hall, they're making a bet. They're making a bet that that all of this energy is going to die out before their next reelection. And it's really part of the reason why it's so important for us to keep showing up, for us to show up to the tax march, to the May 1st protests, to our district offices, to these town halls over and over again, is so that they understand that the energy is not going away, that this is something that they're going to be seeing for not just this week, not just next week, but for the next 2 years and right up until their next election.
Mm-hmm. I think you're up.
Cool. All right, Isaac asks, the Indivisible Guide gives us great strategies to deal with Congress following the very successful pattern of the Tea Party. However, the Tea Party's amazing electoral success in the midterms of 2010 had the backings of billionaires like the Koch brothers. How will we leverage our town hall tactics into massive electoral victory in 2018 when we don't have those Tea Party types of financial resources backing us?
Yeah. Can I jump in? Great question. Wait, who asked that?
Isaac.
Isaac. Thank you for the question, Isaac. So when we put out the Indivisible Guide, we were very explicit that this was based on the strategies and tactics of the Tea Party. Look, we didn't agree with the Tea Party's racism. We didn't agree with their often violent tactics, but we really did agree with the fact that they implemented a local defensive congressional advocacy strategy, and they did it with Civics 101 tactics. This is showing up at public events or going to district offices, making calls. That stuff works. But the analogy with the Tea Party only goes so far. You're right. We don't have the Koch brothers. We just don't. We've received, if you go to, sorry for the plug, if you go to indivisibleguide.com, you can click the donate button right there. We've received about 18,000 individual donations, averaging less than $50 each. That's how we're sitting here today talking to you. It's because we've received those really small dollar donations. There's nobody up above writing enormous checks making all this happen. It's you who's making this happen. We received, I think, a $15 check from North Dakota the other day with a really sweet note. That's what's fueling the movement. But even beyond the money, look, yeah, we would love you to go to indivisibleguide.com and make a contribution. That would be great. But
Or
beyond,
your local Indivisible group.
or your local, please, yeah, your local Indivisible group. But even beyond the money doesn't vote. People vote. And so if you are part of this movement, if you are showing up at your local town halls, at your district offices, at these special elections, that's what's going to win this for us. That's how you are actually part of the resistance. Yes, some of this stuff takes money, and it's great if we can get some contributions in, but we don't need the Koch brothers in order to win this. We need you to show up and be part of the movement.
Yeah, and I think, and if you're considering whether to donate or to go down to your group and meet with the group or go down to your member's office, go meet with your group, go to your member's office. That's what matters most.
Mm-hmm. So I'm actually all out of questions. I think we were getting the signal to
Yeah.
wrap up.
Yeah.
Well, so go to indivisibleguide.com. There are tons of resources there specifically for recess. That's recess toolkits, that's sample questions at town halls, that's explainers on exactly what makes your member of Congress tick. All we are doing here is trying to provide the materials and toolkits and resources to make you impactful. Look, we have a lot of opinions on this. We're former congressional staff, and we would like to empower you with information, but this isn't about us. We are not the leaders of this movement. The leaders of this movement are represented by the 6,000 blue dots behind me, including what, Huxley, Iowa, our newest blue dot behind us. So this really all depends on you making your voice heard. So we hope you go to indivisibleguide.com. We hope you download the resources. We hope you go and meet in person with your local Indivisible group. And we hope to see you at the next congressional recess too. Thanks so much for joining us, everybody.
Good night.